Hello, morning.
Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning. Hello.
Asha is there as well. Good morning,
Good.
Elizabeth.
Good morning. Hi, Kasia. Everything okay?
Yes, I tried to have a professional background, but it's my son's room, I'm afraid. And when I put the screen behind me, it just eats it. So it will be very human. Hello, everyone.
I have to say, I get so many questions of where the door behind me is leading. It's just a cupboard.
Exactly. Well,
My colleagues are always asking, what is it behind you? Where does it go?
Yes, but it adds a nice element, right?
Yes.
How's the weather in Germany, Elizabeth? Also so good?
I am actually still based in Amsterdam.
Oh,
I am not so far from all of you.
Oh my gosh, you could come physically then.
I could have, yeah, I could have, but I had too many. I didn't realize it until too late, and then I thought, well, maybe it's already enough people in the
room.
But
Yeah, for the corona.
No, I am back and forth. I was based in Amsterdam, and I will eventually relocate, but not quite yet.
Oh wow! And why based in Amsterdam then?
I was previously working for Climate Kick. In
Climate
Amsterdam.
Kick. Oh.
Yeah. And I started with Zoe at the beginning of the year, and it's not the greatest time to move, so I figured I will give myself a little while longer.
Yeah. Oh.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hi, I just wanted to, I'm not in this session, but I wanted to say hi, I'm Linda. So I'm the one who
hi.
you into
Nice
contact.
Linda.
And I really want to follow up with you after this session.
Gladly.
I'm really interested about your work, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. So
Thanks.
Great to see you here.
Yeah, nice to meet you, even though I can't see you, but
okay. So
to hear you.
The camera's on the. All
you
right.
are
Okay.
the session will begin shortly.
I don't know where. Okay. I think the camera.
Now we see her.
Yeah,
That's Linda.
Human.
Have fun.
Thanks.
Het is wel handig. We hebben 3 staantafels. We hebben straks een paneldiscussie.
We also, or Entrepreneur is also not here yet, right? No, it's not.
But maybe that the last table is the best, you have most space. No?
Yeah.
Katerina, how do I say your name? Just so I pronounce it correctly, or for my own knowledge.
Katarina is perfect.
Okay, great. I made the assumption, but then thought I don't want to ask.
Yeah. It's a Polish version, and I always make a joke that that's why my kids are called Laura and Victor.
Dan ga ik op een arrow zitten.
Kan je nog steeds achter de tafel staan?
Goeie ruimte hoor.
Dat is heel grappig, want als je een foto maakt van iedereen met die pijlen, het staat heel gek. Want het lijkt natuurlijk op
We heard them. Do they also hear us?
die blote benen zo.
Oh, okay.
I thought that question was coming from the blue box.
Oh, no, that's me. It's me. This blue box is like this magic box. What's going on there? Who is there? Yeah.
Ja, verstaan je mij? Je verstaat me niet.
Ik ben heel snel.
Maar als ik deze afdoe, gaat het beter.
So, Sonia, I actually have a quick practical question for you. had assumed not to have any slides. I assume that's okay. This morning I had a moment of like, oh, maybe a visualization is better, but I can also assume that maybe you didn't get that. So it's also fine.
You can, of course, always share your screen if you want to share a slide.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll go without. I kind of have a bit of a rule of thumb personally that like less than 10 minutes, I try not to use slides because I think the screen sharing and the up and the down and the moving around ends up eating into time too much. So I stuck with that. And then this morning had a moment of, oh, maybe I should have some visual, and then it's fine without.
Yeah, but if you have just one, I mean, one will not take that much time, probably will too. And if it doesn't work, you just talk. You can share your screen and talk along. And if it doesn't work, just don't.
Yeah, I'll go
best.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That's fine.
And where do you live in Amsterdam then?
In the south.
Oh, wow, yeah. Chic. Oh, okay, nice. You did well.
Yeah, so maybe not that far south.
Oh.
Yeah.
And Kasia, you know, by the way, that Rita is also here. She will handling the chat, right? So if there is any time or whatever, hi Rita, and people have questions, you can always ask her, Rita, are there any questions in the chat? And then she will read them out loud if there is time.
That would be great. I mean, we will try, because I think it's not nice when there's like no interaction.
I totally agree with you. And therefore the scripts are very short. So I hope every time there is some time, especially when after, for example, Elizabeth has spoken. Hey, there's Jonathan.
Guys, it's nearly time. Shall we activate?
Headset. Oh, ears.
And you hear me? So Sonia. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm coming from the blue room. We've got 6 in the waiting room, 7 now. Shall I start letting them in?
Sure. Yeah.
Right, everyone's coming in.
Welcome, Jonathan. We don't hear you. You're muted.
You hear me now, I suppose, huh?
Yes, we do.
Okay, super.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? It's the first time, I think, at least for me, a moderator is not in the room. Well, many people actually are in the room. But this is actually the case with Ideas from Europe sessions and ideas, that many of those are done for the first time. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this opening session of the European Roundtables 2021, organized by the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. And I'm coming from Ministry of Klima in Brussels, in the European Commission. And it's my particular pleasure to have these roundtables organized by a ministry that is called Economics and Climate. I'm actually here because before I was doing SMEs and startup policy, and I had the great pleasure of working with Peter Verstop and his team on Ideas from Europe. And somehow, a couple of years later, these two themes really came together. And in a way, today's session and then the follow-on sessions are about economics and climate and solutions that have impact, that must have both economic impact and environmental impact and social impact coming together. My name is Katarzyna Bałcka-Dębska. I'll have a pleasure of trying and moderating this session from afar. We have some speakers that are in the room, and we have some speakers that are connecting. And I think these hybrid meetings are going to become our reality. So let's try them out. But before we start discussing, a little bit of inspiration doesn't hurt, and it even helps to frame meetings like that, where we are trying to find good solutions for accelerating the transitions that need to happen. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Jonathan Bert, who is the founder and CEO of RoboVision, a Belgian company, so a neighbor somewhere here, that specializes in industrializing deep learning. And with its AI vision platform, RoboVision wants to open up the human-machine revolution in many sectors, like manufacturing, healthcare, security, and agriculture. And Jonathan is actually a disruptor of the year 2018. So let's see where his disruption is here today in 2021. Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katarzyna. So I'm Jonathan Bertie. I'm the founder of a Benelux company called RoboVision.ai, leading AI company. And I see myself as part of a new generation of impact-driven entrepreneurs. People with a mission that use technology to improve society and make it a place where everybody is a part of this technological revolution. And that's a challenge. Technology does not have a good image nowadays. Big tech is accused of manipulating our young generation into advertising actors, and artificial intelligence is not attractive for people that have a manual labor job, for instance, in a greenhouse. So as you can see in the image here. And that's why our team thinks that the digital transformation needs rethinking. And it needs to take into account the role of workers and non-IT savvy people as well. Also actors in our society. And in our team, we call them Frank and Bob. Frank is a data scientist. He has studied a PhD at Wageningen University. He knows everything about plant science. And Bob is a shop floor worker, or he works in a greenhouse. And to build this new society is also thinking about all of these roles of these people in this new society. Bob knows a product. He has been working for 30 years in horticulture, and they need each other. They need each other to close the gap and transform our society, as you can see here at Florensis, in a new generation of collaborative machinery, where data scientists, workers, operators, and machines add value to our economy and disrupt value chains, disrupt complete systems. And what we see is that companies that were very artisanal, like Florensis in Dordrecht, are using AI to attract workers, to attract non-technical people and give them the pride to work and to transform in these value chains. And to transform our post-pandemic European economy, we need these Franks and Bobs, we need them together. And that's why we chose to transform the word artificial intelligence into collaborative intelligence. People of different backgrounds and expertise working together to improve our economic value chains. In the Netherlands, for instance, many family businesses in horticulture are struggling to grow their business. Tulip farmers, rose growers, all of them, they need actually tooling to be able to follow these economies and AI economies, but they cannot afford the consultants of PwC, Deloitte, and the likes. So we are empowering them. We are democratizing AI by giving them the tooling and by upgrading our value chains into high-tech value chains. And our European society needs to become ever more competitive to support our global leading role from a social perspective. That's where we're strong at. We are leading also in privacy with GDPR, you know that. That's why we want, as entrepreneurs, to create impact and help these SMEs and small businesses with collaborative intelligence. Not only that in horticulture, but near Amsterdam, Southeast Amsterdam, together with our real estate partners, we're building a complete new city centered around ecology and AI, where we are rethinking together with big tech and the players alike, NVIDIA, the concept of a data center, which is way too power hungry right now, and to design systems that are distributed data centers and can warm up CLT houses and can give all of the heat to the warmtenet in Amsterdam. So we're also working together with vulnerable groups there to embed them into this AI value chain. It's called the Wooden AI City. And we believe that the future is inclusive, ecological, and uses data and AI to lower food waste and chemicals in our food chain. From seed to consumer, data can make sure that our resources are more optimally used. I'm Jonathan Bertie, and I'm done speaking. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Jonathan. You've definitely done the job of inspiration, and you know, we like to say here in DG Klima that disasters collaborate much more than us, and there is no vaccine for climate change. But I believe, like, if there is a vaccine, it's the entrepreneurs. So absolutely, let's keep on trying. So that was a really good framing into the discussion. Now, the goal of today's session is to see how we can uptake such impact entrepreneurship ideas. How can we find investment for impact ideas and innovation? And there's going to be 2 days of subsequent sessions. This one is on future fit economies, on the models, on finding tangible calls to action. And today in the afternoon from 1 o'clock, you can then follow sessions on tangible calls to action around energy storage solutions. At 4 for high tech for people and flows. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, AI for personalized medicine and treatment. And at 1, space wisdom for smart cities. So let's take today's session as a framing for the very tangible discussions. There is a chat. The chat is there. We will take your questions if there is time, but use the chat also to connect with each other. And you can watch this session also on YouTube. I would now move to introducing next speakers and the panel. So we will have Peter Verstop, Director of Entrepreneurship at Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policies. We will have Elizabeth Durst from ZOA Institute, Senior Policy Consultant. I'm a big fan of their work. Joël Fuentes, non-executive board member, investor, tech entrepreneur, TTT Fund. We will have Giulietta Marani, Program Director, DG Campus, and we'll have Paul Iska, Chief Failure Officer. I love this title. I have behind me, I'm in my son's room, so it might look not professional, but actually it's really topical because today we're trying to shoot, we will fail, and we will listen to ideas how to get a clear shot into not only basketball, but also what it is that we're trying to do here. I would like to ask Peter now to tell us, Peter, from your perspective, why are we here today? What's this workshop and the follow-up workshops all about for you? Why do you need them?
Thank you, and good morning. Good morning all, and good morning, Kasia, especially. It's good to see you again, albeit afar, but I can see you on a big screen right now, so that makes a little bit up. So it's good to see you again, and well, good morning all our listeners, viewers, and participants in the call. I'm happy to co-host and organize the European Roundtables from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy, because we think it's very important. It's very important that we give the floor to networks of entrepreneurs, investors, universities, knowledge institutes, etc., to together work on solutions for today's problems. It all started a few years ago when we started Ideas from Europe. And we wanted to have a showcase for entrepreneurs who have solutions for global challenges. And we wanted to do it not only in the Netherlands, but on a pan-European scale. So we joined forces with the European Commission and with the EU SME Envoy Network. And together we organized Ideas from Europe. And in the beginning, it was a Eurovision Song Contest for entrepreneurs, which was great, of course, because we showcased entrepreneurs who had a great solution for global challenges. But later on, it developed into what we now call value tracks. And in the value tracks, it's more sophisticated. It's more sophisticated because we want to join forces, we want to collaborate, we want to build partnerships with entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs, you may call them, investors, impact investors, you may call them, knowledge institutes, universities, clients, well, in short, everybody who can contribute to developing markets and finding new solutions. And why is that important? Why is that necessary? Because in our view, we are in a transition phase. We're in a transition phase on the number of markets. If you look at energy transition, energy storage, personalized medicine, these markets are changing, are evolving into something new. And entrepreneurs play a key role. And Kasia, you call them the vaccines of today. And that's absolutely true. That's absolutely right, because these entrepreneurs, they have the new solutions. They have the answers for some of the big questions, but they cannot do it alone. But they need the help, they need the support, we need the public-private partnerships with all the other actors within the ecosystem. And that's why these European roundtables are so important, because there are a series of events we organized from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy to opening up to global and European markets, to opening up to global and European networks and ecosystems. So a few years ago, we organized the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. Last year, we organized the European Entrepreneurship Summit more on a European scale. And today we have the European Roundtables. And it's all about discussing, enabling entrepreneurs to find new solutions and to have an impact on our economy and on our society. So I'm Peter Waasdorp, Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy, and I'm looking forward to a great panel discussion. Thank you.
Many thanks, Peter. It's great to see you again, as clear and as energetic as always, to put us into the discussion. I'm trying to send my energy, but I don't know if it perspires enough. So, Peter, you highlighted the main things. From your point of view today, like what do we want people to live with? The most important thing.
What do we want people to live with? The most important thing is that we have to realize that in order to have impact, we all have to do our bit. And we all have to do our bit in enabling entrepreneurs to scale up their business, but also we have to do a bit from the government's point of view. And I'm a policy maker. I advise on policy to the state secretary. So for me, it's important that there's a takeaway from these European roundtables, what we should do next from a public policy point of view.
Brilliant, many thanks. And on everybody doing their bit, because we're in entrepreneurship setting, I'm gonna do my 10-second speech. Go and have a look at EU Climate Pact. EU Climate Pact that I'm working on now builds on ideas from Europe in a sense that it's all about citizens and stakeholders taking part in what we need to all do for the climate and environmental transitions to happen. And now I will ask Elizabeth Dirth to give us a little bit more of background and basis to build on. Elizabeth is from Zoe Institute. It's all about redesigning industries while at the same time supporting structures that we need so that these redesigns look also at societal, environmental, and technological changes, because we talk a lot now about building back after COVID. How about we build forward? But if we want to build forward, how do we do it? Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Katerina, and thanks everyone for having me. So in my short 10 minutes, I'm gonna answer those questions. And I'm going to do this by first talking a bit about boundaries and why they're good for us, and introduce some frameworks. I'm going to talk a bit about the future and what the future, particularly in the EU context, looks like. And I'm going to leave you all with a bit of a challenge. So first of all, I want to talk about boundaries. We all know them. We experienced them a lot in the last year. 1.5 meter boundaries between the people around us, boundaries as borders closing in on us, maybe even our home has felt like a bit of a boundary. We interact with boundaries all the time, but they're often ones that we can see and feel and touch. They're a normal part of our life, and they're very easy to understand because they're tangible and they're close to home. Well, our planet has boundaries also, and the way we're currently going, we are currently crossing them. And it turns out that we're actually not very good at respecting the boundaries of the system in which we live because they're intangible and they're abstract, like planetary boundaries. Perhaps some of you have heard of the framework that I'm talking about. This concept of planetary boundaries was developed by Johan Rockström in 2009. And many of us will have seen this stark visualization of our planetary boundaries, which shows that indeed there's these upper limits or thresholds of essential aspects of our natural system. And indeed, we're crossing many of these. Perhaps the ones that have been in the news cycle or in the policy cycle the most recently relate to biodiversity loss and climate change. But we also have some social boundaries, and these ones are less known, perhaps because there hasn't been the same kind of stark visualization that's made media circles, but we're also currently crossing those ones as well. And these relate to things like housing, education, access to food and water. And I introduced these two boundaries because they're essential for the future of the economy, because the future of the economy must exist within these two thresholds, within a social foundation and an ecological ceiling. Some of you will recognize what I just described as actually being the model of donut economics as developed from Kate Raworth. And the idea is that our economy, where we can all thrive, is somewhere in between, as I said, a social minimum and an ecological ceiling. So I just want to put it bluntly to all of you that if the economy of the future needs to fit within these boundaries, to be truly future fit, so does every single business model, so does every single government, so does every single stakeholder. And we're not currently working like that. And we need all actors, from startups to scale-ups to large established companies to funders to city and national government, to start asking themselves, how do we plan to thrive within these boundaries? How do we use the donut as a framework for our future? So these are quite intangible boundaries, and we all know that we struggle with these. So I'm going to take one step to making these ideas a bit more tangible, and I'm going to talk about a specific framework that's being implemented right now, which is a framework for investment. And this is the COVID recovery stimulus funding, or those of you who've been following the Resilience and Recovery Fund from the EU. This is over 670 billion euros invested over the next 6 years into the European economy. This funding package is going to set the direction of travel into the future for Europe, without a doubt. And here we can see a large scale investment coming into the EU economy with a framework of conditions about how the investment can be invested and what. This condition setting, or these boundaries, are an innovative way that public policy can guide investment to build an economy which stays within our planetary boundaries. So I give this example because in this funding, we can start to see a tiny inkling of what Mariano Mazzucato refers to as a mission economy. This is an important example because these boundaries are not just about setting limitations, they're about setting goals. They're about creating enabling spaces for innovation and creativity to thrive. And in this case, these boundaries are actually doing both at the same time. They're setting limits of what can be invested in, and these limits are also an essential part of goal setting. And we can see in this example, the public sector, in this case, the EU, setting the economic recovery on a mission. So what's the mission here? Of course, in the short term, it's about recovery from the current crisis, but there's a longer term mission that's equally as important. And this is the green and digital transition. So I want to switch gears and spiral down and become even more concrete and talk about this green and digital transition. What does this mean about the future of the economy? What does this mean about where Europe is headed? So I've spent the last month diving deep into the details of what this funding will enable, reading thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of country plans about what they're going to invest in. Well, we're going to see some really exciting stuff here. We're going to see a huge increase in high-speed broadband access to rural communities across Europe. We're going to see a huge increase in digitization of citizenship and government services, increasing citizen participation possibilities across Europe. We're going to see a huge investment in green transport, green energy, energy efficiency, large-scale investment in education and training, modernization of our healthcare. These and many more are great examples of how public sector investment with stakeholder collaboration can deliver social and environmental outcomes for all, for realizing our particular mission. Now, this investment framework and these boundaries means that the public sector is orchestrating large-scale green and digital transition, and in this transition, all of us have an important role to play. So now I'm coming to my challenge, and it's a challenge for all of us. There's a question of whether this investment is going to create an economy where we can thrive within these boundaries. And from where I'm standing and the way I look at it, actually not quite yet. There's a few pieces missing. And I want to dive into two specific examples which sit exactly at the intersection of the climate and digital transition. And these serve as an example of the way that the public sector needs innovation to be able to deliver on these big societal missions. So as part of this funding, there's going to be 135 billion euro invested into the digital transition across the EU. This is going to deliver, as I already said, essential outcomes for education, for social connectivity, for our healthcare systems, for collaboration, and for business. But this comes with a catch. Digitization is going to mean more energy use. From the devices we use to participate, to the servers, to the infrastructure, the digital economy requires more energy. And as we're headed now, this digital transition is going to increase this energy use. Relatedly, it also is going to require more devices. We participate in the digital economy through some piece of technology that we touch. And in turn, this is going to mean more material use. It's going to mean more tech waste, more e-waste. It's a common myth that the digital economy is inherently green because the energy used and the equipment used to participate in this is somehow seen as outside of the scope. And actually, impact of digitization isn't just about a positive impact. It also needs to be about reducing the negative. And when we think about digital innovation, we often forget that side. So when we look at this problem from a whole economy framework, using, for example, the donut and understanding the boundaries that we need to live within, actually, these challenges aren't out of scope at all. They're challenges that we all need to face up to in our innovation. And I'm going to say it in a bit of a provocative way, given the audience, but at the moment, the tech industry and a digital economy hasn't yet figured out a solution for these challenges. And therefore, we haven't yet figured out a way to thrive within these boundaries. And we haven't yet figured out a way to be truly future fit. So I use this as an example also because government hasn't cracked it yet either. Not a single country plan that I've read has adequately dealt with these challenges in their investment in the digital transition, but they're absolutely essential for an economy that thrives within an ecological ceiling and a social minimum, and absolutely essential for the green and digital transition. So here's my challenge to all of you. How do we solve this? I'm genuinely asking, I'm looking for ideas. These are two specific examples of challenges we need to solve, but we also need to solve the broader challenge of how the digital economy is not just the industry of the future, but also fit for the future. And I would argue that we need these boundaries and these frameworks like the donut framework to be able to do that. So to wrap up, I've given you two concrete examples of how innovation can support realizing the mission of the recovery process. They're specific examples of areas where public-private collaboration can together create social and environmental impact, or to reference Mazzucato again, co-created value. The recovery process offers immense opportunity for the private sector and the public sector to co-create the digital and green transition by working collaboratively towards these big missions, but also crucially to solve the roadblocks along the way. So I've mentioned these two examples, there's a load more. But if you're looking for impact, collaboration on these missions offers huge potential for that. And I want to wrap up with this. A future fit economy is one based on a model where we thrive within boundaries. And to get there is going to require public-private collaboration on these shared missions. And the COVID recovery process offers a really unique opportunity to start building that economy together. Thanks.
Many thanks, Elizabeth. That was a really good baseline for the discussion. I particularly like when you talk about boundaries, because then you said they're actually goals. When I look at my daughter, who is 14, I think about them as opportunities. She doesn't buy anything that is not vegan, or she doesn't consider sustainable enough. And this is the customer base we are actually looking at. In terms of frameworks that you have mentioned, they are very important. The EU level is loved and hated for setting frameworks. I think the ones that are relevant and interesting here to mention is the sustainable finance taxonomy that has been revealed and is ready to use. I would be interested to hear whether it's fit for purpose. Like, how do you as entrepreneurs see it? This is also a question to our panel that will be upcoming. There is also a digital green coalition that is going to look at precisely not only the emissions of IT companies, but also of the solutions that they are proposing, like by sector. I think this is going to be very interesting to look at, because you're absolutely right. The problem with this whole thing is that it's so holistic and interconnected, and by turning one screw, you might be actually messing up something else. So how do we manage to take this holistic view, and the value tracks of the ideas from Europe try to do that, but is it enough? Is there anything else we have to do? And there's also, of course, in terms of frameworks, that do no significant harm rule at the EU level. But I wonder whether, in practice, it goes far enough, and if it's applicable. And actually, I just wanted to jump in for 1 minute to jump back to Jonathan, because Jonathan, you mentioned also the need to kind of rethink the link between entrepreneurship, digital transitions, and the IT impact. Would you like to react to Elizabeth's notion on, like, we need more ICT, but that means energy, and can we deal with that from your, you're doing it in practice, you're using ICT in many ways.
Thank you for letting me commenting on that, because that's really something. Last week I sat together with Mariana Mazzucato, and it was also about innovation and how government and societal structure can force the industry and also the ICT industry into innovation. And that's really what's happening now at Southeast Amsterdam. So we're thinking out of the box there, rethinking ICT, re-engineering even main boards of servers in order to cope with these big problem that ICT is ever more consuming energy. I mean, I think Bitcoin is already the size of the Singapore economy in terms of electricity. So it's 5 after 12. I mean, everybody's talking about climate goals, and yet also about digital transformation. But we need to really make steps together with the policymakers in order to make this digital transformation into a sustainable transformation, and not just a Gartner hype cycle buzzword transformation.
Many thanks. Yes, that's indeed crucial, and from what I understand, we need to even go further, and the Digital Green Coalition is going to do it. Like, if we apply ICT to agriculture, like, what is the cost benefit of doing that? Okay, I think it's a good moment to move to our panel. I would like us to, you mentioned Mariana Mazzucato, and when we were preparing this session, we and Sonia, the master behind Ideas from Europe, described Paul Iske. She said, you know, he's like Mazzucato for this session. So Paul, what is your take from the scientific and entrepreneurial perspective at what was mentioned already? You call yourself master of failure. Are we on the pathway to failure, or is there hope?
There's always hope. And certainly if you talk about entrepreneurs, the European definition of entrepreneurship means it's an attitude. It's an attitude of people who seize opportunities and are able to exploit previously unexploited opportunities. And that's what we talk about, because there are so many of these opportunities. However, I think we have absolutely no shortage of ideas. We have no shortage of great entrepreneurs. What we do have a shortage of is projects that make it to the end. We call this the last mile, referring to the cycling tours where people cycle for 200 kilometers or more. At the end, it is decided in the last mile who will win, because then you have to sprint, or you have the trip upwards the hill. And that's what we also see with many innovations, or many attempts to innovate. On the one hand, you have the stage in the process where you have to develop new concepts, new technologies, and quite often the ideas are great, energy is great, support is great, and then you have a concept. But then you come into a complete different ballgame, and that's where you have to change the environment, where you have to change people because they have to change behavior, they have to spend money. Maybe you have to introduce new technology. And I heard a lot about new technology. I like the comments, by the way, about the role of AI. I don't use the word artificial intelligence because I honestly don't understand what is artificial about intelligence. So if you want to use AI, I mean, I have artificial plants in certain offices because we cannot take care of the plants. So we put plastic plants, and that's artificial. I don't know exactly what that means in terms of intelligence. So if you do want to use the abbreviation AI, please use it as additional intelligence or augmented intelligence. Then I understand what we are talking about. So, and if you don't do that, then if you talk about failed projects, failed innovation, we might end up with this well-known formula which says NT plus OO equals EOO. And that stands for new technology in an old organization gives you an expensive old organization. And I've seen many expensive old organizations. And where do they come from? They come from the moment that people do not really understand how difficult it is to implement innovation. Because we are very good in startups, we are very good in new concepts. But like I said, then we have to change the system. And the system shows very many signs of immune responses. You have to change maybe business models, revenue models. You have to change culture. You have to change organizations. You have maybe even to change the law. And that's exactly what I think, which is should be the topic of this, this movement that we talk about, is how we together can create that absorptive capacity of the environment. And for that, indeed, we need to work together. For that, we need various perspectives. I sometimes compare this topic, this question, with the famous story about an elephant that's being touched by 6 blinded, folded people. And the people ask, okay, what is it? And one feels the leg and it says, oh, it's a tree. And the other one feels the belly and says, oh, no, it's a wall. And the third one feels his nose. It's a snake. They have no clue what they're talking about. But when they ask each other, and what did you feel? And they combine the observations, then they say, it has to be an elephant. We call this in complexity science emergence. So the real problem emerges. And the good news is the solution also emerges in this cognitive space that emerges when we combine our forces. And that's why we need to bring together not only the entrepreneurs, but also the scientists. also the people who do the economic models. People look at it from an economic point of view, from a societal point of view, intellectual capital point of view. We need a government, also quite often as a system owner who has quite broad view. And all these views together and all these competences together, at the end of the day, they define the elephant. And I think this last mile can only be dealt with in this way, by bringing together all these different disciplines, all these different competences, all these different roles in the system. Then we are able to identify and unravel the problem, and then we are also able to construct this combined solution. And that's exactly what's happening here. And yeah, the process, I call this combinatoric innovation. We create, everyone already has pieces of the puzzle from different perspectives. If you bring it together, if you create new combinations, then you get this new approach and new opportunities. And that's what we're looking for. The opportunities are there. People make great starts. Now let's finish it and make the last mile the first yard.
Absolutely fantastic, and I completely agree with you. And we have tried to do it in ideas from Europe to see what the startups need in order to scale. This can definitely be applied to many things. But do you have like a good example? So we talked about failure.
Yeah.
And I guess in analyzing failure, we also come up with good examples. Have you seen a good example of kind of old system absorbing innovation in a way that doesn't make it expensive, but makes it augmented and better?
Yeah.
Get inspired from?
Sure. Now, first of all, indeed, I'm the CFO, the Chief Failure Officer of the Institute of Brilliant Failures. And our mission is to raise understanding for the complexity of life in general and innovation in particular. And indeed, this last mile, we have seen many examples why things experience barriers. We have identified 16 patterns for failing, actually. And all of them we have seen in reality. And one of the things that I think is most important here is when we talk about what we call the canyon. And a canyon refers, you think about rivers that are flowing to the sea or to the ocean for millions and millions of years, and they carve out a path and they manage to get to the sea. But they do not understand any longer that there could be another way to the sea because they only know their own path. And that's what we also see in the practice. And when we talk about these wonderful things called protocols, procedures, guidelines, best practices, they're all based actually on the past. This is knowledge from the past. And the question is knowledge from the past good enough for the present and certainly for the future? And if I talk about expensive old organizations, I've seen quite often that organizations, and I do a lot of work in healthcare, for instance, are struggling with the new opportunities. And we will talk about it as one of these streams also in the value track methodology, as we talk about personalized medicine, personalized healthcare in general. Then we see all these opportunities that are there, both based on progress in biomedical science as well as in data science and certainly the combination, but we're simply not ready for it yet. We have all the technologies, but we have incompatible data sources. We have not the right cultures. We do not have the right revenue models. So before we know, we get into our own patterns again, in the old patterns, into the canyons again. And so a good example is indeed how we deal with patient information. Now, this is a struggle already for many years. And we know that technologically, the problem is solved. Now we have to put it into the practice. Now we have to change organizations. Now we have to bring people together and convince them that together we can do a better job. So I think that's a good example where I see this last mile. We see all the solutions there, but we have not been able to implement them yet.
Exactly. It's all about psychology. You know, I've been reading about changing patterns in my own habits, and let alone organizations, big organizations like a healthcare sector that you have mentioned. But let's see. I mean, so one thing is collaboration and then implementing collaboration. And of course, when we talk about, the last mile, there's a lot of talk about, but we need money and we need the right investors. And we have Joël Freites with us. And I just wanted to ask you, from the investor's point of view, can this collaborative approach also be taken into account? Because stereotypically speaking, we imagine an investor as someone who kind of alone or maybe with the chief financial officer of whatever VC fund looks at things and then decides to invest. How does this collaborative approach enter also the investor's world? And of course, the investors that want a better impact beyond just financial ones in their investments.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that trend is already happening. I'm on behalf of the government also on an independent commission to judge which seed funds, the venture capital seed funds, are getting a loan from the government. And I see it changed over the last few years already. Almost all the pitches we now get have an element of impact in it. And I think as government, we can also, instead of all the time inventing new things, look at things that are already working. And I think, for example, the seed capital rule, which is adding money to venture capital funds that are investing in an early stage in tech startups, they get a loan from the government. Why? Investing in early stage is risky. The returns are lower in general, and you want to keep a healthy ecosystem there, because in the end, if we want to solve problems in society, we need new inventions, we need innovation. And this is coming from scientists, entrepreneurial teams, and then we have to bring these innovations from the university towards the largest industrial giants we have in Europe. And there we need to roll this out. And in this ladder, in these steps we need to take, we need stimulus from government in the steps that are difficult to be taken. So there's also the technology, thematic technology transfer system in the Netherlands, where you have a collaboration between venture capital funds and university. And I think this is working. But if I look at the system, and like we had a pitch last week, I think we saw 11 funds, and I think 10 of them absolutely were worth investing in, but we only had budget for, I think, 4 or 5. And that's a pity, because this was about 20 million, which is not a huge amount for a government. So I also think we should look again at what vehicles do we have, and also, and then maybe make them a bit larger when they work. And then the second thought I have in my mind is that we can be better neighbors in Europe. And I think COVID was a great example. Every country started to invent their own tracking system, app. They started to invent their own registration system. Why not copy from the neighbors? And I'm absolutely not in government, so maybe I'm missing out a lot of things. But why is the Netherlands not calling Belgium saying, hey, how are you doing it? How far are you with your vaccination registration system? And copy more from each other. This is one European Union, and now I'm talking as citizen, but I was thinking like, hey, are they talking to each other? Do they have a weekly conversation between the team in the Netherlands and in Belgium or in Germany? And why are we all inventing the wheel in our own countries again? And I think that would be an interesting exercise. And maybe that's already happening, but from the outside, it doesn't look it's happening enough. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but.
No, I think so. On the collaboration, I think when everybody's in the state of panic, we fall back into the canyon instead of going out. So you mentioned that you see this kind of move towards more conscious investment. Apart from not enough money, this is always an issue. What would be like one other thing to fix? So from my point of view, are you like worried about greenwashing, or are you worried about people pretending that what they're developing is actually impact worthy investment? And is there anything else that we absolutely really need to move?
Yeah. Now, I'm more worried about greenwashing when we're talking about the giant corporations and industries than I am worried about greenwashing in the entrepreneurial area. So I think low-hanging fruit is with the 11 or 12 largest polluters of the Netherlands. And I think what I see in startup, that's being looked through very easily. So yeah, even if last week we look at 11 funds, you see a couple of them that are definitely just picking it up because it's a trend, but that's you see through that. And I think the ecosystem sees through that. Yeah, I think greenwashing at bigger corporations, they're better at maybe framing it or positioning it in a way that is visible. But at the bottom start of innovation, I don't really see that. And it's also maybe a new generation that is much, much more focused on the impact part. The beautiful things I saw also is some funds, they start to change the remuneration system for the fund management. So instead of just being paid on the financial success, they also have measurements in place on say, okay, how much CO2 do we reduce with our funds? And that also impacts then the bonus system for the fund managers. And I think that's something we hope to see more being rolled out across all systems, financial institutions.
Okay, many thanks. I would like to turn now to Giulietta Marani, scientific and policymaking perspective. How do we advise governments based on entrepreneurial feedback? Like, so what do we do with all this? How can we in practice better collaborate?
Well, I think I really like that we should share more practices, but not only across countries, but also across sectors. I think that's also something Elizabeth mentioned, the clash between values that can be there. And I really think we should have this dialogue of what values do we design for, what do we want for in the future, and also how are the roles and accountabilities changing. So for me, it would be designing for responsibility together, and the government can facilitate this innovation, what I call collaborative innovation. So working together on new services. And what we see, so we work on the digital public services, is that technology enables a lot of other stakeholders to provide these public services. And it would be good to embrace that and really work together. And I think the government can enable, and a scientific world, well, two things. I think they can keep the long-term vision, because mostly research is for a long term. And the other side, what I really like is working with students. They're the new generation. And I think this new views, but also they will have to live in the world that we are designing right now. Just keep them close and use universities and their students also.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned keeping the long-term vision, but actually, if we look just at the recovery that we need to do, this is okay, keeping long-term vision but going fast. The 2030 target of lowering emissions by 55%. Mm-hmm. This is not really long-term. This is, again, we have to go fast towards the 2050. Do you think, like, from what you see, are we able to keep this kind of balance between needing to actually go fast but on a long-term vision? And how?
Well, what I always think is that if you have this long-term vision and then you calculate back what you can do today to just have the first step towards that goal, but have the long-term vision, and also make small steps, make it visible. But that's also very important in collaborative innovation, because if you don't have small steps, people may lose interest. They don't see their interest maybe or it's at stake. So it's very important to have the long-term vision and also start with small steps. And yes, it is. There might be some tension every now and then, but I think right now also with the governmental infrastructure and structure that we're using in the Netherlands 4 years. And we don't look beyond that. And I think that is good for Europe. It is already a longer term vision, but still maybe we should also see what happens after 2030, what is needed then.
Absolutely. I wanted to see if you would like to react to each other. Also, Jonathan or Elizabeth, like on what was said, is there something that you really feel needs to be commented? And while you are thinking about it, I would like to ask Rita to see if there is a question from the chat that we would like to also read out.
So we have a question from Sonia. Shouldn't every plan have a doing no harm principle?
Okay, so that's one question. would you like to react to what you have said to us and what needs commenting? And then on the do no harm, either I can do it at the end or you can as well.
I think you're referring to me, and I'm happy to do both at the same time.
Right.
So maybe I would first say that this do no significant harm principles is, for those of you who've not been so deeply involved in a recovery funding process, is a very technical term. So I didn't say this because I didn't want to go too deeply into jargon, but indeed all of this is the framework that I was referring to, that all of the plans and all of the proposals from various member states have to adhere to this concept that they cannot do any significant harm to the environment. And this is indeed the jargon or the technical term for the boundaries that I was referring to, that the Commission is creating to enable the kind of mission of a digital and green transition. And indeed, this is, as I referred to, a really important public policy innovation to facilitate some coherence around social objectives and environmental objectives, and delivering both of these things at the same time. Maybe I would just pick up one piece about this long-term thinking, because I think this is also quite important. So in the process of the recovery, we've seen initially, obviously, this crisis, and then people talked about building a different future, using the opportunity to build something brighter, to look forward, to build forward. And then as it went on, we started to then, that narrative went away, and that narrative somehow, and this is a totally normal psychological response, when we were stuck in it longer and we started to think about building back and recovering, and less this aspirational view of the future. And I think we need to find again this long-term thinking, this long-term visioning. And that's also why I point out the green and digital transition, because I think they're a good example of government trying to do that, trying to pull out, this is what we want to salvage, this is what we want to create out of this crisis. But I would also just flag a couple of frameworks which somehow, for me, have been a bit forgotten in the recovery or in the response to the pandemic. And one important one is the SDGs. Politically and businesses and society, we made a big commitment, and a lot of people engaged with this in the process of identifying that and signing up to that. And they've been largely absent in the discussion around COVID recovery. And I think we need to revive this framework. I mean, yes, it's only till 2030, and this is indeed not the kind of longer scale, longer time that we need to be thinking about. But they're framework that we've already got, and we need to go back to using that. And then I would say, what is then the longer term target? And arguably some of the climate targets are then again the next step further down the line. But indeed, I would reiterate, to start from this vision, start from these targets, this long-term aspiration, and work backwards. And I think this will also help ratchet up ambition for us all in terms of our impact and contribution to these challenges.
Absolutely. No, SDGs are still there, and I think they are super relevant. But thank you for indeed reminding us about them, Elizabeth. I don't know if other members of the panel would also like to comment. And there is one more also question from the audience about it seems to Jose that in order for innovation to happen, we need to pass the entrepreneurial ideas into large developers for commercialization, and he feels that it's enough to support innovative SMEs and so on. We have tried that. We keep on trying that in Europe. Does it work? What else can we do? Because this is also a bit the question of changing systems. I'm asking myself, is it enough to put enough of innovative kind of bits and pieces into the system so that it forces it to change, or is there a different way? Like, how do we not lose this entrepreneurial and innovative spirit and solutions in the system so that it doesn't swallow them? And I think if anyone from the panel would like to answer that, and also start offering some closing words, because the organizers have been very clear about us needing to finish on time, and we are doing great so far.
I would love to briefly answer, maybe we can share the time, but I think some areas of entrepreneurship, they can float on their own, but there's still if you look in the deep tech area and the area where we really do inventions that can change our world forward on the SDGs areas. So, for example, new batteries that are cleaner and less negative side effects. There we still need more government help, because changing a battery system, that is a sales cycle of 7 years instead of 7 months when it comes to a normal startup. So that's really something I do a lot in Delft and in Eindhoven, and there's a lot of startups with great inventions really on the intensive care now. And there's lots of money from China, there's lots of money from abroad, but not enough yet from EU and the Netherlands.
Money is one thing. I used to be the head of innovation of a large bank in the Netherlands, and I dealt with many business cases. Well, we had a very nice definition, by the way, of a business case. And business case is a set of lies that make somebody else decide what we want them to decide. And that means that you spend a lot of time on predicting something that create a very nice view, but it is not a shared view. And that's the point here. And I think that's also one of the essence of the value track methodology, is to create this collective value case. So we should not talk about the business case, we should talk about the value case. We also talk about, of course, about economic capital, financial capital, but also about the ecological and societal capital and intellectual capital. Don't forget that one. And what we have seen is that if you want to create this collective view, you have literally to bring people together. So we also created an environment, and you see also now everywhere in the world, including also the Netherlands. I think, for instance, about the Brightlands campuses in the south. Think about what's happening in Eindhoven, in Delft, everywhere. It already helps when people come together and work together. And when people meet each other every now and then, and that's also one of it's also the philosophy of the value to bring people simply together. They start energizing each other, they start enthusing each other. And then at the end of the day, it's my strong belief that if you come with a good collective value case, the money will come. The money will come. And what I see is people have much more troubles in getting the money just from one party. But if you come as a collective, if you come as a consortium, then I think, and I don't give any guarantee actually, but what I do give as a guarantee is that your probability that you will enthuse the big parties, enthuse the government is much bigger. But that starts with really getting to know each other, coming together, work on collective goals, work on this collective value case. And like I said, it's too much people with a great idea working somewhere and believe that other people will throw money at them. I've seen it so often, and like I say, it's my feedstock for my institute to bring failures. Yeah? But you know, if you look at the CB Insights database, 70% of all failed startups at least in the US, at least have one of the components of their failures that they produce a product that nobody's willing to pay for. Yeah? There's no market. And then they run out of cash and all those things, but you can predict them before, and you can see it happening. And the interesting thing is, and I will stop, people always are being trained. We have startup programs, we have startup boot camp, we have business schools. What are they being trained for? To be successful. What they're never been trained for is the most likely scenario. It is that it will not be a success. And a lot of value is destroyed because people are not good in dealing with a failure.
I totally agree for life tech. But when it's deep tech, the market comes only after 7-8 years. And that's a long period to pay salaries of developers and the scientists. But yeah. I agree, you have to bring ecosystems together and then validate.
Yeah, maybe that's also validate. And I also think there might be more value cases than one. And to scale up, I already hear Paul say, sometimes you have to pivot. And that means see where the broader use is and bring also unexpected people together, and maybe not the first end user or governmental agency you think of, but also test it in other fields and sectors. I think that would be really worth to try, and then validate it in all sectors to make sure that you have a bigger business case and more value chains than one.
You should go to value case instead of business case.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think in the afternoon, and also tomorrow, we will go to value cases, right, Peter? I just wanted to hand over to you for inviting people to go on.
Thank you, Kasia. I would like to reflect on the discussion, and I'm not trying to wrap it up the discussion because it was a very rich discussion and a lot of topics were discussed, ranging from the challenge between the energy transition, the climate transition, and the digital transition. How can we join and combine them until long-term vision, learning from failure, which is very important. And on a personal note, I would like to add that long-term vision is extremely important, but you can discuss about how long the long-term really is, because that's for some people that may differ, of course. But from a society's point of view, it's not a race. From a society's point of view, it's no use if you reach the finish line and you turn around and you see that you're all alone. So that's no fun, and that's no use. So from society's point of view, you have to build inclusive ecosystems. And within those ecosystems, people will win, companies will win. Some startups will win, some startups will fail. Some corporates will win, some corporates will fail. So but from society's point of view, you have to build inclusive ecosystems. And that's what all this talk about today is all about. That's why the value tracks are building collective business cases. That's why they are building inclusive ecosystems. And that's why we are now these 2 days talking about in the European roundtables, how can we build, improve inclusive ecosystems, and what is the role of each actor in this ecosystem in building that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was the best summary we could have. Don't forget to log back in at 1. There is another workshop from the series. Thank you very much to the organizers of Ministry of Economics, Climate and Values, and to our fantastic panelists. Thank you for letting me moderate you from afar. This is how connections are made. Have a great day, everyone, and see you soon in the workshops. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.